What is the best computer for music production? In this video I'll take a look at the components that you want to have in your best computer for music production, and I answer the question: a desktop or a laptop? My name is Dexter Clark and I do reviews, vlogs and tutorials about DJing and producing music. If you're new to the channel, make sure you are subscribed and hit that little bell icon. In this video I'll talk about the specifications for a new computer with the vision of buying the best computer for music production you can get. So not the budget or the mid-range category, but the I'm nearly a professional music producer category. I will put a table of contents in the description below. A laptop or a desktop? Well, choose a laptop only if portability is a necessity and not a convenience. With a desktop you have more bang for your buck and it's quicker. Components are always first developed for a desktop computer. That means that laptops are a little behind in development on a desktop. Also do laptop developers concessions in speed in order to fit all the components in the small space of a laptop. If you're working on the battery of your laptop, then your operating system, Windows or Mac, will slow down the computer to save the battery life of your computer. But that means that you don't have the optimal performance you can get from the machine. Yeah, I know you can change some settings, but a lot of people don't. So that's something to bear in mind. Due to the small space of a laptop, you can't cool your components properly, so manufacturers slow down the computer to make it not overheat, so it doesn't break down. Again, this makes your computer slower than it needs to be, and you need a fast computer for music production. Also, PC desktop computers are more expandable than laptops. You can add components later if you like, or replace them. A Mac or a PC? Well, that is a pretty extensive subject on its own, and therefore I made a special video about it. Check it out if you like, Mac or PC. The link is also in the description. What is important? In the early days the most important things were processor and memory, but nowadays it's more SSD and a processor. And yeah, memory is important, it's still important, but it's not that important anymore. To be honest, an SSD doesn't let you make your music faster, but your computer feels much more responsive and more snappier. The processor. A 7 series processor of the latest generation with preferably as much cores as possible. As you may know, synthesizer plugins, reverb plugins and analysis plugins will take up a big chunk of CPU power, so you need a pretty powerful processor. It's the most important thing for music production. The quicker the CPU, the more calculations it can do in a second without having any dropouts or that annoying message in Logic. With CPUs, the number of gigahertz is important. Rule of thumb, the higher the better. Because we have limitations in the number of gigahertz a processor can produce, we increase the processing power by adding more cores. A core is effectively another processor in the same shell, that is working side by the other processors. So more cores is more speed. But with double the cores, you don't have double the speed. With 4 cores you have a good basis for music production. Yay! There are roughly 5 types of CPUs. In order of processing power in the same generation, the first being the slowest and the last being the quickest. The 3 series, then the 5 series, and quicker are the 7 series. Some brands have even a more powerful 9 series and server-grade processors. Server-grade processors tend to have more cache memory, which makes them quicker. But the server processors are somewhat behind in development, sometimes 1 or more generations. Because every generation processor tends to be more optimized and thus quicker, it is yet to be seen if a server processor is indeed quicker. Look up comparison graphs on the internet to compare computing power between the specific types of processors. And is the price increase worth the extra speed? Well, most of the time not. What is cache memory? cache memory is also important for speed. Cache memory of a processor is the fastest memory there is. If a processor can find repeated tasks in the cache memory, it doesn't have to go to the slower RAM memory. In other words, the bigger the cache of a processor, the quicker the CPU. Oh, and one thing. Those turbo boost frequencies are more a marketing term than anything else. With turbo boost you can boost your frequency for a short amount of time, and that is useful for opening a website, for example, but not for music production. You don't take advantage of that. You ask a constant amount of computing power of your processor. There are two main manufacturers for processors, Intel and AMD. I heard some stories that AMD has compatibility issues with some MIDI controllers and also with some plugins. I can't deny or confirm that. Storage. Choose a SSD drive. SSD stands for solid state drive, and solid state as opposed to the loose state of a spinning magnetic platter hard drive. Choose at least 1 terabyte. You will run out of space sooner or later. And especially sample-based plugins eat up a lot of space. For example, there is a commonly used sample-based plugin that already takes up 500 gigabytes full installation. And you need to have some room left for your operating system, so Windows or Mac, your DAW, your samples and your projects. You want to have a PCIe or M2 connection on your SSD, because then the drive is directly inserted into the spine of your computer, which makes it quicker. The other connection is the old school SATA connection, which was made for those old school spinning magnetic platter drives. An SSD with SATA is still faster than a loose state hard drive, but when you have the choice, choose PCIe or M2. PCIe or M2 is 6 times faster in reading stuff and 3 times faster in writing stuff than SATA. A SSD drive has an extra advantage above the traditional hard drive. They are not likely to crash when bumping or sudden movements occur. That is especially handy for notebooks which have a portable character. The difference between PCIe and M2 is the connection in the computer. The only difference being that M2 is meant for SSD and PCIe for various extensions like sound cards and graphics cards. If you have an M2 connection on your motherboard, choose M2, because then you have more free slots for other hardware. An SSD is quicker than a hard drive, but a hard drive is cheaper per gigabyte. There are hybrid solutions out there, so you can take advantage of both, but you can also choose to have both types of drives in your computer. Then you can put your DAW, your samples and your operating system on your SSD for the quick part, and do projects, for example, on your hard disk for the slower parts. Because I want to make this video short and concise, I left a lot of information out of this video, but the information that is lost you can find in my ebook. There's a whole chapter about computers for music production. Check it out if you like. The best of all, it's absolutely free to download. The link is also in the description below. The memory. 16 gigabytes is, well, the minimum for music production. But I would say 32 or 64 gigabytes, especially if you're using a lot of sample-based instruments. You can get memory in different speeds. And of course the faster, so more megahertz, is better than the slower, but yeah, it's just a small difference. Nevertheless, if you want to achieve a certain kind of speed, make sure that and your memory module supports it and your motherboard supports it. A good quality big wide screen, preferably a 21-inch screen, well, better even a 27-inch screen, and well, preferably even more than that, a big widescreen, because if you can see more of your timeline, you have to scroll less, which means a quicker workflow, which means that you can produce your music faster. There are ultra wide screens on the market, and those are ideal for music production and video editing. You can also choose a second screen, then you can put your tracks on your first screen and the EQ and mixer, for example, on your second screen. A graphics card, and surprisingly a graphics card doesn't matter that much. DAWs don't take advantage of the extra computing power like in video editing, for example. Don't get me wrong, you need a graphics card in order to get a picture on your screen, but an onboard graphics card will do the job just fine. A mouse. Often in music production you also need to scroll sideways, and it's really handy to have a mouse that supports horizontal or side scrolling. Side scrolling means a quick workflow, which means that you can work faster. So here is an overview of my recommendations. If you consider buying a laptop for music production, check out my special video about the subject. Also, you can read more about computers for music production in my free ebook. Links to both are in the description below.